to be like him? It is maybe all of you inside this room that you will never realize, that so many people, so many young people say, I really want to be part of this. Since I heard Dr. Yunus talking about what he is doing, with the Palestinian Red Cross, that one statement of yours in a particular setting, will drive so many, young people in the same movement. It is because, some of us, read about, wonderful times or difficult times where then people did wonderful things, and we would like to be part of that. It is because that we have witnessed humanity at its worst, and exactly during that time, some people showed humanity at its best. And we decide that our choice would be to be part of those that show the best of humanity. Because indeed, in all those crises, we see those two faces. We see there are people exploiting the most vulnerables and the poorest. We see people in the pursuit of power and personal gains, put arms in the hands of children and then lead to devastating issues and situations. We've seen also in the most devastating situations, be it because of natural disasters, children being exploited, women being abused. We've seen that. We've seen humanity at its worst in many of those situations. But in those very moments, do we see that the poorest of the poor stand, even before any of us arrives, stand up and share the last grain they have to feed those who are hungry and are coming into their communities and then are being called refugees. That's what we've seen in this region. I see old women, standing at the border of Tunisia and Libya, taking care of people that they did not consider to be refugees. We see in many other countries, in Lebanon, where thousands and thousands of Syrians, before UNHCR, let's be humble, before the Red Cross, before the Red Crescent, communities taking care of those in need, poorest people taking out the last blanket they have at home, to cover, the child who's suffering, in the cold. And those were the source of inspiration. And that is the reality. We just have to, look and watch. It is when you stand in homes, to see volunteers, knowing that we've lost 47 of ours on the front line, but that is exactly the reason why that we continue to involve ourselves and engage and try to make a difference. And maybe I will be the 48th, but there is no reason for inaction, that we need to do something about it. It is sometimes, that people try to do everything possible in the most difficult circumstances to recover their dignity. In whatever way they have to recover that dignity. Sometimes in an extreme way. The Syrian refugee in Lebanon who sold his kidney to take care of his family. And happily so. Because I said, well, I sold the kidney. I got money. I took care of my daughter. And I don't feel that I lost anything in the exchange. It is about, standing together with you, Dr. Yassin, in Doha. When proud fathers and mothers like you and me are no longer just, looking for a food parcel or looking for a tent, to sit in, but to strive to recover that dignity of being a proud father and mother who take care of himself and herself, and then to take care of their own children. They call it resilience today, they tell it commitment, they call it humanitarian imperative. It is simple, plain, the search of human dignity. And that's what we're all about. And if it is true, then we are always there on the side of the communities, to accompany them. Our relevance will only be tested against also our relevance to support you as national societies to accompany those communities, to address those needs of the hour. People used to tell me at the beginning, you have to be very clear what we will do. I'll be focusing on armed conflict, that maybe ICRC will do that. Will you be focusing on natural disasters or hazards? That may be the added value in our federation. Will you work on long-term development? That is not what we are supposed to do. The only thing I know that we're supposed to do is our relevance will be tested every day throughout the continuum of accompanying those communities. If I look at what national societies do, I've not met any single one or any single volunteers who sat to wait for the conflict to hit, or sat to wait for the earthquake to happen, or for a natural disaster to happen. You are running schools, you are running nurseries, you are running dispensaries, you're taking care of the elderly, you're taking care of the sick, you are addressing the need of vulnerable young people, you are taking care of the internally displaced, you are taking care of the refugees, who often, in many of the communities, are not even seen as refugees. They're simply seen as fellow human beings across the line which is called the border. But because of the circumstances, they find themselves, here with us, and we have to host them. And that's where we draw our inspiration from. And that's what we learn, and that's what the communities, are teaching us. That is maybe not what they are expecting us, to respond to in an effective manner. Our first mind and first circle maybe relevance is, how relevant are we to our own communities? Every national society in its own setting responding, to those needs. That's where it starts. Now we can divide ourselves, in poor countries and rich countries. We can divide ourselves in the north and the south. We can divide ourselves in many different cuts. But that is not what matters here. What matters here is that wherever we are, and I'm really insisting, wherever we are, we will always find those pockets of vulnerabilities, those pockets of communities, in need. And unless we respond to those first, we will not gain the relevance and the legitimacy, to make us maybe the actor that should be playing that global and even international role. If you think about it, let's get out of the region a little bit. United States of America, superpower. You go to Washington, D.C., and you go to certain communities, you may find more young people in prisons, than in colleges. If you go to the suburbs of Paris today, you may find the second largest Malian city after Bamako. In many Nordic countries, and I saw my Nordic colleagues here, you may find communities from Somalia, from Eritrea. They may be in size and numbers much larger than any middle city of the countries of origins. If you take a continent like Europe, which is quite a wealthy one, you find groups such as Roma populations wandering all across the continent, and then reminding us and reminding everybody, what we're about. That we are not all equal in face of hardship. We are not all equal in terms of opportunities, and that is where our solidarity, will be tested. When I was in Sweden, and that moment of humanity to see the Red Cross being open, to anybody in need, walking in, find a moment of warmth in the cold, to take a shower, and then gain a moment of dignity, among others. Maybe a simple signal to say, this is, what we're about. I'm sure I'm here forcing open doors, but it is just important that, in times like this, before we go into, maybe the more bureaucratic and administrative nature of our work, we remind ourselves, where we are grounded and what makes us, this wonderful movement we are. And that is calling on so many people to want to join us and to want to be, part of us. And that is exactly the same time also people are looking up to us to see are we fit for purpose. Are we relevant and are we legitimate? And there is not one answer to that question. It is a permanent search. It is a journey, that we will need to travel together. And in that journey, we will have to learn every time and then have the capacity to apply whatever lessons we learn in what we do to make us, better, to make us, better fit, for a purpose. I could sum that up to just say, very simply, always there on the side of the communities. That is a vision. Always there together, individually, but also as part of a very strong global network. That is the other element of the vision. To organize ourselves, that we have, the right structures, the appropriate resources to remain relevant. That is part of that vision. To be bold, push the envelope, and always try to be ahead of the curve. Because the magnitude of the problems, that we face will not give us any satisfaction with any 70% or 80% unless, we reach the 100%. Our relevance will not, be real. And this is not just an ambition, that is the reality of making a difference out of not. You may know that in the last 4 or 5 months, we've been very actively involved together with you in the Ebola response. And that is a very good example of what I've just said. Until the last person infected with Ebola either is free of the virus or, unfortunately, died, we have not made a difference. 80% of people in needs covered, 100% of safe and dignified burials, done. These are not good indicators. They are good activities, they are not good indicators. The day we say we are not burying anybody, with this virus, then we make a difference. The day we say, there's absolutely no new infection, whatsoever, we make a difference. But only one infection remaining will give us, the same, type of challenges, that we have. So it is not just an ambition or rhetoric when I say 90% is not good enough. Unless we have 100%, we will not make a difference. And this is a cruel example, that's reminding us of that reality. We are a federation, and let me reiterate that. I'm not heading the international organization of the Red Cross and Red Crescent. I'm serving the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, which is a membership organization composed of you, the owner of this federation, the incarnation of this federation on the ground. And part of the vision is all the national societies are partners in a sense that they are all beneficiary of the common good of our federation, of what we stand for. Partners in the sense that they will all contribute, to that common good. And I mean all. The fact of carrying a problem or facing a challenge in your community and in your country it is knowledge, it is power, it is also an ability to alleviate the whole world of a burden of that very problem that you carry. And that is a great contribution. Let me come back to Ebola again. Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia can make a huge contribution to the whole world by containing this epidemic. And only they can do that today. Because there is only one way to contain it. It is right there where it is happening. Nigeria, South Africa account for 80% of all transmission of mother-to-child transmission of HIV in the world. 2 countries can only 2 of them get involved and alleviate the whole world of that burden. Now the number of, we know almost, if we use the meteorological data wisely, and then we put early warning systems and early actions in place, we almost know where the next monsoon will hit. We know almost very clearly, when the Zambezi River will get out of its bed and then flood, many parts of Mozambique and then Zambia. We know what are the recurrent, droughts that are coming almost in the Horn of Africa. And that comes all the way, to Central Asia, and then many of the parts that we work and then live in this region that are driving many people on the road and on the move. And it is only then, when leadership is exercised at that level by those very communities, by those very national societies, that we can alleviate, the world's problem. It's not necessarily because that's where the resources are, but that's definitely where the problem is. That is definitely where the leadership should be shown. That is definitely, where knowledge, including traditional knowledge, is available. And that is maybe where we expect that we all open now to go beyond, what we are individually, to capitalize on what is bringing us all together, as a force of a movement, and use that as a platform of solidarity, partnership, and collaboration. And that leads me to say, as part of the vision, nothing for national societies without national societies. We will work with you, we will work through you, we will support you, and we will ask you to support us, to better support you in the pursuit of this mandate. So, those are some of the realities. Those realities are the realities of today, but those realities of today are showing us also some trends of tomorrow. If we talk about a global world, that happened a long time ago. The world has always been global. I think what is new, it is the developments and then the rapid developments that we're experiencing today with an accelerating effect of social media, new technologies, and communication that never happened before. So we are almost living in a world of instantaneity. So if you doubt that, you just have to watch any young person who will try to log on to the internet, and it takes 1 minute to log on. So then he will leave it. It is just too long. There is no patience for that. But I think that that same impatience also that is being translated in form or in front of many of the social and political processes that we are witnessing. And that leads to either strategies for survival that we can see. If they go right, we call it resilience. If it goes wrong, it can go to very extreme behaviors and then becoming themselves problems that we may face in the future. If we address it alone, so it will go well beyond our capacity, because again, it is of global nature, and we will be tested here again on our capacity to see what are those trends that we share in common, and how can we bring our forces together in addressing them. The trend of a youth bulge that we see particularly in this region. In this region, in many of the countries where we are confronted with problems, more than half of the population is less than 20 years old. How we will be dealing with a trend of rapid and non-planned urbanization, where we see that today already up to 80% of people in a number of our countries are living in urban settings. While many of our development and humanitarian work were based on rural models of water, of sanitation, rural models of primary health care, rural model of agricultural development. So today then we face things like, how do we find opportunities for young people in urban settings? How do we reduce vulnerabilities in urban settings? How do we address violence in urban settings? How do we do education, which is not only numeracy and literacy, but education plus, that will be more respectful of the environment, that is more respectful for peace and stability, so that young people will not duplicate, many of the violence and violent situations that they have witnessed. And instead of revenge as a feeling, some reconciliation and the commitment to work together as a community. How do we plant those seeds? I think those are the kind of trends and challenges that we will be facing. More people are living long, and in a number of countries, then you will find the other extreme of aging population, and we wonder where will be the young population that will be supporting them. All this, which is the reality that I just briefly described, as well as the trend that we face, will in front of them just ask ourselves very simple question: what does it mean for us as individual national society? What does it mean for us, as a network? And if we translate that at the level of the federation, what would be our role, to help, facilitate responses that will be very critical to the needs, that we see. We're a network that will require that we build and work the agilities that are required to adapt to the different changing environment and situation that I mentioned. We're a network, that will also call on abiding very strongly to producing those results, because the communities also do testments. We are being watched every day, by those communities. I think the decision to rally around our cause is an individual decision by those communities that can't be forced. Either we're relevant and then they're with us, or we're not. They're not with us. And I think many of our national societies today, in many parts of the world, can even ask the question, how are we going, from 10,000 volunteers, to suddenly 5,000 volunteers, over a period of 5 years? Why did that happen? Of course, competition, of course, other actors, of course, changing environment. But all of that are, a contribution to the question, are we really, relevant? Are we winning that place? And who's making that decision? That will be the communities and the volunteers themselves. And we will see, again, as I mentioned before, in very difficult circumstances, that those numbers are growing. And I think that is the best testimony or the best appreciation or evaluation of what we are about. I was again in this region, in a country where they wanted me to answer the question at any cost. What is the place of this national society on the ranking of the 189? How do you, as the Secretary General of the IFRC, evaluate which grade, will you give, this national society? It didn't matter how much I tried to explain. They just wanted me to answer that same question. But the honest question is, it really doesn't matter. The only grade that matters is the grade that the communities themselves, will give to that very national society. The only grade that matters would be the grade that the volunteers will express, themselves, either to want to be part of it or to want to be dissociated from. And then each of us can make, that test more or less. We're guided by history, as we said. The fundamental principles that, resisted, the test of time and still, remain relevant. The movement that we're not alone, that we try to organize by showing how we divide roles, how we divide responsibilities, how we divide leadership. But time is now, maybe, how do we unite to lead? How do we unite, to have greater impact? How do we unite, to, make a difference? So our work together with the ICRC is something which we don't want to see as just a nice thing to say, a nice thing to do, but it is something that we must do because it is the right thing to do. That's what we're about. So we're committed, to do that. And again, the best way to just eloquently talk about it and to stand to be tested, by time and tested by realities of, what we do. Just to inform you, last Friday we spent the whole day together defining exactly, what those, not only principles, the principles are there, but if we trickle them down, to exactly what are we going to be doing together, how we will do it, at national level and at an international level, based on trust, based on respect, and a respect also of leadership, of national societies on the ground, and all of us rallying around with the same one motivation, addressing the needs, of those populations, and that's what we will do. Quite often we are seen, to be also the organization which is at its best, or judged at its best, when disasters hit. So I'm coming from a school of thought where there is no natural disasters, almost no natural disasters, but natural hazards. Hazards will always happen. Now, the capacity to prepare and to respond effectively to those hazards will either make it a disaster or not. We had an earthquake in Haiti, devastating, as we all know. The scale, on the Richter scale, was about 8. 7. It looked like 10. It looked like 10. So you have 6 many times, many other times, and if you're unlucky and you go to mission on Japan, or to Japan, you may, in the middle of a meeting, experience a 5-degree earthquake, in the middle of a meeting, where everybody run under the table and get out and pull out the dust, and then the meeting goes on. So, if you're a Sahelian like me and you witness that, and people say it's okay, so let's carry on. So it's not okay. So you need quite a lot of time to recover before you get into. But it shows a certain level of preparedness, to address the natural hazards. God forbid, if those shocks were happening in many of our countries and in many of our regions, it will be a natural disaster, no doubt about it. If we see now how cities are being built in many places, how we see, how norms, are being respected or not, now we see if, good governance is applied or not, if we see now the level of transparency and the level of corruption, let's say it, or not, all of that will be contributing to the capacity, to be better prepared in order to prevent any natural hazards from becoming a natural disaster the way we see it. If now the commitment that we have today on resilience will help us address that, so let's go for it. So I'm very pleased that together with you, so we are calling this initiative of 1 billion for resilience, not $1 billion, but 1 billion people, that will be engaging at the level of communities, at the level of the cities, and at the level of leadership, to make sure that capacities are being built, not only to resist shocks, but also to make sure that we respond effectively on a daily basis, to the needs of the populations. Here, I cannot talk about what we're about in this region, so not to describe what the conflicts are. You know them much better than I do, and that is not what we will be called for to resolve, because that is not our mandate. Our mandate will be how do we minimize, the human suffering in the middle of that, and how can we do that, differently, because the situation has changed, dramatically. Even in the worst battlefields in history of Solferino and the Second World War, the First World War, there was a certain level of respect and abiding to norms and rules, that we could count on. Where are those today? If we are losing 47 volunteers now in Syria, that is totally unacceptable. If ambulances are being shot at, that is totally unacceptable. If mosques and churches and synagogues are becoming the battlefields, rather than those who are wearing uniforms waging wars, this is totally unacceptable. So the challenge we face here is now the challenge where the rules are no longer those clear, where the lines are getting blurrer and blurrer, which again we have to come back to those very principles of humanity that will be providing us with a basis to respond. How do we build trust among the communities? How do we build respect among members of the communities? How do we support each other? And how can we create those safe spaces, whatever they might be, even in the most difficult circumstances, to respond? And when we ask those questions, and everybody is expecting that this is the way to do it, the only best answer that I got was from a volunteer in Sierra Leone who said, "Sir, if we as Red Cross, we don't do it, who's going to do it?" So that was a very eloquent foot for thoughts. So the stories that I could call on from these regions are many, and many of them are compelling. But every citizen, every decision maker, every government in the world knows about the situation that we are facing here in this region. We know about the situation of the vulnerable people. We get inspiration, as I said, from the same communities that are helping them first to address the need. But we cannot accept, and this is our greatest challenge, that we face a big risk of a lost generation that may replicate the situations of today and tomorrow. And what can we do together to prevent that, to invest in work with young people, and to make sure that our humanitarian response will always have a plus which is planting the seed for tomorrow. There are very simple things we can do. If we are part of a federation and a network, it's about sharing of knowledge, which is quite uneven. Let's do that, and I think it's doable. We can share our experiences, in a humble way, while being open, to also include, new lessons. Because the solutions of yesterday may not always be 100% the ones of today or the ones of tomorrow, but they can provide a base to start from, and an openness to learn in order, to make a difference and strive for excellence. We can make also sharing of resources that are also uneven, and those resources, are badly needed. If there is something, that is real, beyond all the fundaments and the principles and the theories, is that winter is a reality, and people on the move who left, their houses and are living in what was called temporary tents. But if you live in a temporary tent for 4 years, so you have to redefine what temporary is. And winter is there. We need resources. We badly need those resources. We are asking, in addition to what ICRC is investing in Syria, we need additional 120 million US dollars to respond to the needs. We are asking for 120 million or plus that we need for people on the move in Iraq, in this region. So charities start at home, and we would like to use this forum and then to ask each of us that now is the time to show solidarity, to express what we are about, which is our shared humanity, particularly in this region, to step up to the plate and respond to the scale that is required to do that. Let me just come back to, of course, the Secretariat of the Federation. So you may realize that I spend much more time talking about the realities we face and how to respond to that. Managing a secretariat, no matter how complex it is not a big deal in face of all the other challenges we face. We will be one secretariat, Geneva and regions coming together, unified with shared results to achieve them. And those results will be mainly focusing on how best we will be supporting national societies, all of them, to support communities, to put it in a simple manner. 2015 is going to be a very interesting year. That is the midterm review of the strategy 2020 that we're already starting now to review, to fine-tune. Is it still standing, the realities of today? Can it be fine-tuned? It is not enough to have a strategy. No, we have to look very concretely. How can we decline that in concrete, programs, concrete objectives, and what kind of resources human and others, are needed, to do that. And only then, how can we organize ourselves, structurally, in Geneva, in the regions, as well as in countries, to make that work. So that work is in progress, very well advanced. In the board in May, we will have to present that, to our board, and then in a final form, and then move from there. That is not, very difficult to do. I think what is difficult to do is how can we all of us, rally around it, and then buy into that process. And again, throughout the continuum of not only disaster response or armed conflict, but the continuum of accompanying the populations all the time. 2015 is also a number of milestones, in terms of the world agenda. The Millennium Development Goals are ending, so we are getting into a new area of sustainable development goals. How can we contribute to shape that? How can we contribute also to make sure that whatever is coming out there is relevant to what we do and the difference we can make? So I'm very pleased to see Mena here, who's our representative in New York, working together with member states in that perspective. And I'm sure your exchanges will help us also to see how we connect those processes with the realities. 2015, the preparation of the World Humanitarian Summit, where also I'm sure, the new agenda, in the humanitarian response will be set because of the many challenges that I mentioned before, because also our humility that we all recognize that we are not matching the magnitude of the responses, because also of the recognition that unless political solutions are found in many settings, unless also development solutions are found in many settings, the humanitarian response alone will not fill all those gaps or deal with all the consequences that it is creating. So it requires definitely a very bold leadership in the global scale and in the world, and there's some kind of a breakdown there, and I think the world has to be dealing with. So member states are preparing, to input into that process. We are all citizens of our own countries. Let's use the opportunity to feed into the process in all of member states. National societies are auxiliaries of governments. Let's use that opportunity also, to feed into that process. Okay, let's use our time here together to see how best we can organize, either collectively or individually, designing maybe some roles and responsibilities to some of them, to feed into that process through their governments. If we cannot do it, each of us with each government, maybe some could take leadership and bring our perspective in that will be very critical. So 2015 will be also a good preparation for the next climate summit that is going to be happening now in Paris, and many of the issues that we're raising as part of disaster risk reduction, as part of preventing natural hazards from becoming disasters, as part of building resilience of communities and facing issues such as global warming and environmental challenges will be very critical. How can we input into that is going to be extremely important. All of that show us we are not only about being on the ground and responding to ad hoc needs. We are about also drawing those lessons and then translating those lessons into policies that contribute to shaping global agendas and global policies, so that the reality that we face can be a better one, so that the kind of challenges we face can be reduced in one way or the other. Now, let me just conclude here by saying and reminding ourselves of the fact that the road will be very bumpy. It's going to be very bumpy because the signs that we are getting for peace and stability across the globe are not very positive right now. It doesn't mean it is not impossible. But let's remind ourselves, as I said, the battlefield today does not have any name like they used to. They used to be called Solferino, they used to be called Lamar, they used to be called Verdun. They don't have any names because they're everywhere. So, if what happened in Paris last week is a reminder of it, do we need such reminders to understand what it is about? Do we need such reminders to understand that the globalization of issues can be translated in any part of the world? We don't need this kind of reminders to understand that the vulnerabilities are pockets that need to be addressed everywhere. And this again will call on all of us to be simply what we are and affirm what we are. Always been there on the side of the communities to accompany and address the needs of the other. If we do that individually, collectively, and come together in a federation to support each other to achieve this, maybe we can have a contribution to make this world a better place. Thank you.